So that's an Iranian terrorist group.
Yeah.
You have like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. They love the term brigade. There may be 50 of them. A brigade is 5,000 people, just so you know. They'll call this brigade or that brigade or this army or this front or this movement. They seem to love the word brigade for some reason. There's a lot of these, and very many of them are very, very small, that are doing terror operations against Israel. Many of them operate out of the camps because they have a safe place to train, organize, equip, and launch strikes. Fatah will allow that. Officially Fatah says we are not at war with Israel, and they just do one of these while another group goes over and does an atrocity. Israeli agents have assassinated a number of Arab leaders, Palestinian leaders. It has gone both ways. As I said, there's been bloodshed both ways. One attacks, the other reprisal. It's been a tit-for-tat kind of situation.
Do the Palestinians use the Quran now?
They are Muslim. Some are Christian. There is a Lutheran church in Jordan, headquartered in Jerusalem. They hadn't got the memo about Jordan, I guess, giving it up, but that's the name. There is a Lutheran church in the Holy Land. It's very small. There are other Christian churches in that area. They are small. Remember, there was the Armenian quarter and the Christian quarter? The Palestinians are predominantly Muslim, but there is a significant minority that are Christian. On the Israeli side, Judaism is the dominant religion by far. However, fun facts to know and tell. What percentage of Israeli Jews, which is 96% of the population, what percent of Israeli Jews are observant?
10.
50. 50-50.
A question on this. The United States' support of Israel is
Mhm.
predominantly from the number of Jewish descendants who live in America.
Correct. The United States has more, and I'm not sure if we have more Jews, I think we still have more Jews here than in Israel, but I'm not sure on that one, it may have changed. People of Jewish ethnic descent.
And so the U.S. is, obviously, we're allies with Israel.
Very close allies.
Absolutely. But has there been times where we've talked about the moderate view of both a Palestine
Yes.
and an Israel state?
They try.
We have tried to push Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel, to view that over and over and over.
Okay.
Netanyahu is more of a hardliner. I don't want to use the word conservative because it doesn't really apply here.
Yeah.
He is more comfortable with talking about Samaria and Judea and it's all Israel than the idea of a two-state solution. But he knows he can't make it happen. And he knows if he pushes too far, we might back off on our aid, which is their lifeline.
Yeah.
So he gives lip service to a two-state vision, but practically does very little, if anything, to advance it.
It's that.
The opposition Labor Party is much more in favor of it. That's who Yitzhak Rabin was part of. But Labor's been out of power now for quite a while.
And what did you talk about when you taught at CGSC and with the folks that talked about Israel, that you dealt with Israel about not being a trusting?
Oh. I think it would be good. Any questions up till now? Comments? Observations? Attacks? Defenses? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about beliefs. The Israeli position is, this is our area. God gave us this land. We were the inhabitants of this land. It is our right to have this land. Okay? Now, do you remember this part here? Note the white are anti-Israel. Note the brown are neutral, and note the blue is pro-Israel. Does Israel have many neighbors that are friendly?
No.
No. Right now, Iraq, they're killing each other happily, yet they all hate Israel. And then if there was a chance to eliminate the state of Israel, they might even join forces to do it. So, given that environment, Israel has, there's one other thing about, to understand the modern state of Israel. Something that happened in World War II in Germany, in places like Auschwitz, the Holocaust. That's critical, because the whole idea of Israel is a homeland for the Jews, a right of return, so that the Holocaust will never happen again. Israeli recruits go up to Masada, which is the last stronghold of the old Jewish state when the Romans conquered it. There was a Jewish rebellion in 70 AD. When they leveled the temple, they conquered it thoroughly. Masada was the last holdout. Jewish recruits to this day, Israeli recruits, for the Israeli army go up there, and they make a vow at Masada, and they say, never again. Never again. So there was a strong emphasis on military, a strong emphasis on being the best military, the most capable military, and to defend their state at all costs, because frankly, look at it. They are heavily outnumbered.
And they all do service.
Yes, all Israelis do 2 years, men and women.
And they're always in the reserves right after that.
You're always in the reserves about age 40 or 50. Now, that's if you're Jewish. If you're Christian or Muslim, you do not have to serve. You can volunteer, but you do not have to. Only ethnic Jews have to. Yes?
And if you're Orthodox Jew, extremely Orthodox,
Mhm.
you also do not have to.
Yes. If you are an yeshiva or a seminary student, if you are studying Torah, studying the law, and you are ultra-Orthodox, you also do not have to serve. The Israeli government's talking about doing away with that exception right now, and there's a big stink in Israel about that. Yes?
In and around Israel and Palestine, and that, I don't know, circumference, including all of those people, there are how many people?
Gosh, hold on.
Israel's what, about 6 million?
Forgetting population.
Somewhere in there?
Let's,
What do you want to know?
I have one of those.
Population of what?
This is why God invented smartphones.
What are you asking? Population?
population of Israel as of July 2013 is about 7.7 million.
Okay. Well,
And they're probably outnumbered 10 to 1, easily, by the neighboring countries.
there are a lot of people in a small area.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see films and if you visit that area, what in the world sustains 10 million or 20 million people in a small area? Where do they get the resources to exist?
The United
For
States.
Israel. Did you ever see that? I was just going to say, did you ever see a hat pass for Israel?
This goes back about 35 years, as part of a class in college, or the seminary, I'm not remembering. What I'm remembering is, as part of a class, we went to synagogue, we saw an entertainment, it was okay. But what I've never forgotten is someone pulled out a hat, an old fedora, and said quietly, "For Israel." This was in the 1980s. The hat was passed. There was nothing less than a $50 bill in that hat. Since we were guests, we were not expected to contribute. That's one reason.
Well,
There's more, but that's one part of it.
well, my point is that in this region, how do the Palestinians exist? If there's no basis, if there's no resources.
Oh, I love your questions. You're just feeding me wonderfully. I'm gonna pay you. This is great.
Well, it's just, I mean, how, you look at Syria and you look at the films today, I mean, it's decimated.
High unemployment. Very high population of young men in their 20s and late teens who have no job, no hope of a job, no hope of a family because they need a dowry in that culture, and there's no way they're ever going to get one. And in Arab culture, the family is more important than the individual. So they are shaming their family. They are a disgrace because they cannot contribute to the well-being of the family. They are mooches still living with mom and dad. 50% unemployment. West Bank, even higher in the Gaza Strip. Unemployment like we've never seen in this country. Far worse than the Great Depression. So, here's a young man. He's Muslim, somewhat religious. That's his situation. And a recruiter for one of the terrorist groups, starts talking to him. Yes, they have recruiters. And starts talking to him about the struggle and, how he would be able to have a wife and a family if it wasn't for those Israelis, and gradually radicalizes him, converts him to the radical cause. He joins a radical group. Now, he's been recruited to do one thing: die for the cause from the beginning. He may not know that, but the recruiters know that. So, at some point, he says, yes, I will die for my people. And they thank him for that, and they praise him for that. And but nothing yet. He goes home and he sees posters up in, let's say, Fallujah, or maybe in Gaza, depending on where he's at. And you see pictures of terrorists. They have bubble gum. They have cards, like baseball cards, for terrorists. They're like rock stars. This again is done by the terrorist groups intentionally to glorify the people who have done suicide bombing. Boy, what a misnomer that is. But anyway. So, next step. They go to him quickly. Now is the time. You must come with us. They move him to a safe house. He is given sleep deprivation and continual propaganda for about 48 hours. He is told about the 72 virgins, which is not in the Quran, by the way.
You wonder why they're virgins.
Well, there's also the old joke that Muhammad is saying, you can't come, we're out of virgins. But anyway, the bit about the 72 virgins is folklore. It's not in the hadith, the sayings of the prophet. It's not in the Quran. I've read the Quran, I can tell you, it's not there. Anyway, told stuff like that. A very twisted, distorted, violent form of Islam that's nowhere near to the actual faith of the majority of Muslims. And then he's given the vest, go out, do it quickly. And they rush him out, and before he can even think, he's there. Oh, left out one thing. His family gets $25,000, which is U.S. That's like $250 would be to us.
I mean, 250,000.
250,000 rather. In other words, that family just went from poverty-stricken to middle class, like that. So he has now honored his family by being a martyr. He has now brought honor to the family for dying to the cause. And oh, by the way, he's brought a heck of a lot of money in. That's the analysis of your average suicide bomber. Interesting, that is in a faith that says it is forbidden to commit suicide. Islam forbids it. The Quran forbids it. The Quran forbids the mistreating non-combatants in any way. That women and children and those who are not soldiers in war must not be mistreated. How do the extremists get around that? They say, well, if you're an American, you're a soldier. You didn't know you all joined the military, did you? According to Al-Qaeda, any American is a soldier, therefore a legitimate target. That's how they twist that religion. It's kind of like how the KKK twists Christianity.
So do they
It's
say
the same thing going on.
Do they say that because we're all soldiers because of all of our aid that we give to Israel?
Yes. Yes, this is the driver of anti-Americanism throughout the Islamic world.
How about the prohibition against suicide? How is that?
Oh, that's not really a suicide. This is operations for the liberation of Palestine. You just blow yourself up incidentally in the process.
Why then do not the imams of rational Islam stand up and criticize?
They do.
They do.
They do.
Okay.
They do. It does not make the American news, but they do. But keep in mind, it's in Cairo that you'll see the theologians of Islam saying these folks are nuts. And they're not bashful about that. But if you say that in the West Bank, if you say that in Gaza especially, you're probably going to wake up dead one morning.
Wake up or not.
You caught the irony. Good. In other words, you keep your mouth shut if you want to live.
One other question to go back to this territorial issue of,
Mhm.
of who has the right to what. Don't we have a similar issue in Southwest though much less predominant, of Mexicans who feel that the southwestern United States should rightfully be theirs?
It's there, but it's, how do I put it? On a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 95, that's a 5.
But if that had credence, how would we feel about that?
Yeah.
Well, actually, go to Hawaii.
Hawaii is a better case.
It's a better
Oh, yeah.
case.
You have it, there's about,
Oh,
there is about these 4 different movements in Hawaii that claim to be the true government of Hawaii. None of them are. But you'll go down a back road in Hawaii and you'll see this tent and they'll say Hawaiian elections. It's not the state of Hawaii, it's one of these independence groups holding their elections.
And there are those that feel that everybody who has come since 1893.
When we began the process of what would lead to the annexation of the islands. Anybody who can't prove Hawaiian heritage before that would be shipped off the island. You lose your land, you lose everything. Is this sounding vaguely familiar, like what happened to the Palestinians? U.S. government owns 25% of Oahu, by the way, as 25% of the population. So that's another issue, though. I'm diverging.
But, yeah.
So we have on the Israeli side a belief system that says we've got to defend this at all costs. Anything is kosher to save Israel. Now, my experience with working with Israeli officers at the Command and General Staff College is they will lie, cheat, steal, do anything to win. Caught one cheating as an instructor. And I was told to ignore it because the State Department would just have my head on a platter and nothing would come of it anyway, because it would be an international incident. The Israeli officer would still be exonerated, still go home. Strange being in that kind of an environment. So I raised the issue and nothing happened. Yes?
Is there anything being done by our scientific community in this country to provide land in Saudi Arabia, which is mostly desert, I think, to make livable land out of it? Like turning it into farmable land? Is anything being done scientifically to have that happen? Because that
Not really.
would be a solution to this problem, give them more land to live on.
No, I'm afraid it's not the solution, because you've got two groups saying, this is ours.
See, it's not that simple.
The Dome of the Rock, the third holiest shrine of Islam, where Muhammad, from this rock, ascended to heaven to meet with Allah and the prophets and then returned. This is, the Muslims say, this is ours. And on the other side, the Jewish folks who talk about rebuilding the temple. Guess what has to get bulldozed to rebuild the temple, folks? Dome of the Rock. It's tied into this particular piece of real estate.
Hey, hon, what
Yeah.
was it before? Okay, I know Muhammad was, 600 and something.
Mhm.
Was there any tension before Muhammad, or did Muhammad, the one that stirred all this up when he wrote the Quran?
No, if you go back before that, then you have to deal with Israelis and Christians. Because it was Christian dominated, Christian run,
Right.
and it was the Holy Land, so it should be Christian. And if you remember the thing called the Crusades, we tried to make that happen later on, but that didn't work out too well.
Yeah, 'cause I was
So,
gonna-
The Crusades were later,
That was later, 10th century
She's
on, yeah.
talking about 600
Yeah.
before.
Right.
It was Christian dominated.
Christian
Okay,
and
so-
Jews were in a
Jews were allowed to live there, but it was
I
Christian
know, but
dominated.
where did the Muslims come from? I mean, I
Oh.
understand, were they Christian before?
No.
What were they before?
Pagan.
Where did they come from?
Right here, this area. Medina, Mecca, some of the tribes from here. Muhammad came from Mecca, that's why it's the holy city. The Kaaba, a cube structure. Islam says it was built by Abraham and his son Ishmael. Here, later on, it became a center of idolatry. There was allegedly 50 different idols in the Kaaba. Muhammad is given the visions, in a series of visions, is given the Quran by an angel. He is illiterate, and so he dictates them to someone else who writes them down. They are said to be the words of God literally, as in dictation. This is something very different from our understanding of inspiration in the Bible. These are the words of God, as in God said these words specifically. Now, He's kicked out of Mecca, goes to Medina, attracts more followers, raises an army, conquers Mecca, starts building a caliphate under the banner of Islam. The Quran is as much a legal code as it is a holy book. It's a both and. Think Law of Moses, 618 ordinances, that kind of stuff. Eventually they move north. They have an invention. They are technologically superior to their opponents because they've got better cavalry. They've figured out a way to use their cavalry more effectively than anybody else. And so the Roman Emperor Herculaneus, right about in this region, has his infantry there out in an open plain to face the Arab cavalry. This is also called suicidal. But he even goes a step further. He shackles his infantry together.
Oh.
So they will stand. They are slaughtered. The Byzantine Empire falls back to what is now Turkey. This area becomes Muslim. That's how the Muslims got there.
Okay, before Muhammad,
Yes.
were the descendants of Ishmael, did they feel that they had the right to anything? I mean, did this just come out from this man, you know?
Yeah, before then, from a Muslim perspective, the revelation of Ishmael as the one with the promise, the Arab people, right, have a right to this land, that comes with Muhammad.
Okay.
So prior to this, you don't see it.
Okay, prior to that, there was no fighting over that land. So it's
Not,
only been since
not,
Muhammad.
not in that sense.
Right. so
There
it's only
was
been
for
since Muhammad.
Christianity and
There was for Christianity, and there was between various empires wanting to control that land.
But they were not Muslim at that time.
They were not Muslim at that time. There are no Muslims until about 600. Unless you talk to a Muslim. They say Abraham was Muslim, Isaac was Muslim, Ishmael was Muslim, Jesus was Muslim, but,
Isaac was Muslim.
oh yeah,
Jesus was Muslim.
all the prophets. Noah was Muslim.
Then how do we get to the radical differences between the Shias and the Sunnis? And how does that relate back to the Quran? And then in our own Christian tradition, back to the Old Testament, you have just as equivalent atrocities that are spoken of, you know, the stoning and the death. You can't eat shrimp cocktail or they'll kill you. What we would consider today to be, wasn't that a breach of the dietary rules?
Okay, two issues. I'll deal with this easy one first. Dietary rules.
Those are health rules.
Halal, which is Islamic dietary rules, or kosher, which is the Jewish, are almost identical. Don't eat shellfish, don't eat pork. Kosher,
Don't get sick.
halal. And if you think, if you are 60 miles inland, living in Jerusalem, back in the day, when this was a day or a couple days travel, did you want to eat uncooked shellfish? There's some common sense here. Also, they didn't know about trichinosis, which you can get from pork. So you could argue that a lot of those dietary laws have a practical application.
Yeah.
But,
or
Punishment
had.
was severe.
yeah, so, Islam basically copied the Jewish dietary rules. So, now what was the first part?
Sunni and
Sunni.
Shia,
I'm
do you
sorry?
want to deal with that, the basics of Sunni and Shia?
Oh, Sunni and Shia, thank you. Okay. Muhammad is the first caliph. He is the religious leader and the political leader and the head of the army. His son was also. Now we get to the grandson, Ali. There is now a debate within this rapidly growing, expanding Muslim community over who should be caliph. Does it have to be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, as in Ali?
Is this their version of like a pope? Is that what we're kind of talking about?
Think medieval pope.
Okay,
Runs a country too.
okay.
All in one.
Has an army.
Yeah, has an army. So, should it be Ali that is this caliph? Or can the Ummah, the Muslim community, choose their own caliph? Shia said it had to be a descendant of Prophet Muhammad, direct lineage. Sunnis said, no, we can elect. There is a battle. If I remember correctly, it's up in this region. Ali is killed. To this day, in the Shia community, there is a festival, if you can call it that, where men will take chains, bare backs, step. They beat their backs bloody to mourn the death of Ali. They are Shia. Sunnis are 84% of the world's Muslims. Shia about 14%, and everybody else is whatever that difference is.
Shia, Sunni are 84%.
Sunni are 84%.
I didn't know that.
The vast majority of the world's Muslims are Sunni, and they live in places like India, Bangladesh. Indonesia is the world's largest Muslim country with 180 million. Malaysia, Arabs are only 23% of the world's Muslims. And not all Arabs are Muslims. Many are, there's a significant Christian minority, although it is shrinking as they leave the area due to what's going on. Baha'i are Arabs originally. So not quite as neat and clean as we like to think it is. So basically you have this split within Islam which persists to this day. Officially they are all brothers and sisters in Islam, and anyone can go to any mosque and worship. That's true. But if you're Shia, you do the prayers a little differently than if you're Sunni.
Kind of Wisconsin Synod and ELCA.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Wisconsin Synod and ELCA.
Well, are the terrorist Muslims mostly Shiite?
I'm sorry?
Are the terrorist Muslims mostly Shiite?
No. Some are Sunni, some are Shia, both are minorities. The majority of the Shia and the majority of the Sunni communities are not terrorists.
Right.
They are small minorities in both groups. But they're doing horrible things and they get the press. Gee, nothing happened here today. How many times does that make the news? Yes, sir.
Basically, Israel can only exist as long as the Muslim neighbors don't get along, even within themselves. Because if they ever join forces, they'd be liberated, become flat.
Except if those Arab forces were to develop competent militaries. Arab militaries are good at suppressing civilian dissent and not much else. I would even argue they are designed to stop riots, stop civil wars, stop rebellions, keep the dictator / president / whoever in power.
Now, is that-
Actual military operations is secondary for these forces. For Israel, it's all about
Right.
defense.
Because I'm thinking with
national
Iraq,
defense.
how quickly that fell, and.
Oh, the Iraqi army, that was not the issue.
Right.
Well, Israel has done something else that has helped their cause. Just the material that we provided them, they've reverse engineered and it's all manufactured within Israel. They're not relying on the United States totally for their existence.
They are relying on us for the raw materials and the technology. Most of the Israeli weapons you hear about were actually co-produced with U.S. interests. Hand in glove.
Right.
A lot of our munitions are bought from Israel, a lot of ammunition.
Right.
That's,
Oh, a lot of our, like US
a
ammunition?
lot of the bullets used in Iraq came from Israel.
45 caliber ammunition was developed, mostly
Right.
which procured
Yes, sir.
from Israel.
A year or so ago, there was some demographics on the state of Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
Has 35 million people,
Okay.
a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like 45% are under the age of 28,
Yep.
and the total population is 40% unemployed.
Yep.
And the oil that they have is running out.
Yeah, they never had much to begin with.
They didn't, and it is running out, and yet the population is exploding. To me, that I mean, for the United States, or, it doesn't matter. These people are going to demand that they have food, water, and shelter.
Yeah.
And there is a powder keg, and I'm just talking Yemen. I mean, you go into some of these other,
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the Yemeni demographics, but I am more familiar with overall Arab demographics. There's an awful lot of people, they're young men in their 20s and 30s, unemployed. However, there's nowhere near as many teenagers, 10-year-olds, 5-year-olds. So right now, there is this generation of young men who have nothing to lose and everything to gain by engaging in violence. But in 20 years, they're going to be 40 years old, and they're far less likely to do it. Something about testosterone levels dropping and a few other things. And there aren't nearly as many kids coming up behind them. There's a demographic time bomb going on in the Arab world. So I'm going to go on a leg. I don't see it. You might. The terrorism issue, the Arab-Israeli conflict is going to fizzle out in 20 years. Because there's not going to be the Arabs to keep it going.
What if we go back, though, to what we were talking about last week, where
Yeah.
outside players can influence? Would that become an issue if, let's say, Russia decides to get heavily involved in the Middle East?
Okay, Russia is,
Okay.
but only in Syria. The Assad regime is Russia's only ally in the Middle East.
Okay.
Because what the Arabs did when the Ottoman Empire went away, the Arabs thought, great, we're going to set up our caliphate again. We're going to have one big country from Saudi Arabia all the way up to the new Ottoman/now Turkish border. And the French and the Brits said, oh no, they carved it all up. And they said, you can have this desert down here, we're taking the rest. And what? You know, they felt betrayed by people like Lawrence Arabia. Had betrayed them, is how they felt. So, let me just finish this out.
Yeah.
So that's 1920s. You get into World War II, this area is pro-Nazi. Why? Britain and France were what?
Anti.
They were on the Allied side. That meant the Arabs would be pro-Nazi. So there was heavy Nazi sympathy. Wouldn't do anything about it. It didn't make a difference in terms of the course of World War II. So now, Brits are back. Eventually, they become independent countries. So how do we get rid of this foreign influence? How do we get rid of this thing called Israel, which the West forced us to accept against our will? Remember, Quran says in Muslim areas, Muslims should rule. It's part of the Quran legal code. Therefore, it's an anathema to have an area there that is not run by Muslims. Ergo, let's become communists. Nasser. You see a whole bunch of these become the Ba'athist Party in Syria and Iraq were originally communists or close to communist movements. They copied the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had influence throughout this entire area. We had the 73 oil embargo, in part due to Soviet influence. Well, that didn't work. Geez, the Soviet Union's gone. So now we're seeing the next attempt to kick out Israel, to assert dominance. Let's be really, really really, really rigid Muslims. Let's go back to Islam, pull out a distorted version of the past, and impose it, and God will give us the land back. And that's what you're seeing in much of the Middle East today. That's a lot of the Arab popular belief that's clashing with this Israeli belief of never again, no Holocaust, this land is ours, we will do anything to defend it to the death. Lie, cheat, steal, dupe the U.S., not dupe the U.S., have a strong ally, you name it, Israel will do anything. Because the fear, look at the Holocaust, I mean, there's some justified fear there. And on this side, how do we get them out of here in order for the Quran to be correct? This is wrong. It should be Muslims in charge. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, John.
Back to the situation in Yemen regarding the age groups and influence and all. Have I not heard in the United States that there is an emphasis on Muslims having large families so they can spread their religion in this country?
Yeah, there's only one problem. First generation, 6 kids. Second generation, 2 kids. Third generation, maybe 1.
They've been Americanized.
That's right.
Well, it's education.
Education
It's proven throughout the world. Education
means a lower birth rate.
means a lower birth rate.
Prosperity means a lower birth rate. Look at Italy. Expected to have significantly fewer Italians by 2050. There is a chance that France will become a Muslim nation because there is still higher birth rates in France among Muslims, and French birth rates are falling through the floor.
And
We would be shrinking except for immigration.
did I not remember you saying once that the Muslims in the United States, generally because of their success, have become acclimatized to nonviolence because they don't want
Much
to
more so.
lose the benefits that they've got?
Right.
Yeah.
They have something to lose.
Yeah, a person becomes a terrorist generally when they have nothing to lose. If they believe I've got nothing to lose, well, shoot, why not? If I'm going to live, if life stinks and it's just going to stay that way, why not die for the cause? Get my name, get my picture up there on the wall as like a rock star or something. Let my family at least enjoy a good life. Why not? Now, wait a minute. I've got a home, or I've got a family, or I've got something. You're far less likely to be a terrorist if you have something to lose. For example, El Salvador. Remember there was an insurgency going on there? There was a leftist terrorist group against the government in the 1980s. Did you ever realize that sort of just fizzled out? Just sort of went away? No accident. The U.S. government put heavy pressure on the Salvadorian government. Get rid of the death squads. Cut that crap out or you're going to lose U.S. aid. The death squads went away. Now, step 2, El Salvadorian government, give your people electricity. So they did a rural electrification project. So now a person who never had electricity can go, hey, I got lights. I like this. Wait a minute, the light went out. What happened? The leftists cut the power lines? Now, who am I backing, the government or the leftists? And the leftists just fizzled out. If you have something, you're less likely to commit terror than if you feel you have nothing to lose. Yes.
Okay. When the Ottoman Empire became modern Turkey, I think it was in the 20s, whoever was the leader
Yes.
at that time, I forget who it was.
Kemal Ataturk, yes.
He modernized Turkey and even changed the alphabet to be the Western
Correct.
alphabet. How does Turkey now relate to all, I mean, it's basically Muslim, I think. How do those-
97% Muslim.
Yeah, how do those Muslims relate to these Muslims down further south?
The current government of Turkey is basically straddling Europe and the Middle East. It has relationships with both. Prior to the Syrian civil war, it had excellent relations with the Assad regime, with the Assad regime. It also had excellent relations with the Israeli government. However, there was an incident in the Mediterranean Sea where a group of people tried to bring supplies into Gaza. They were on Turkish ships, the Israelis fired on them. Turkish government didn't look too kindly to their ships being fired on by the Israelis. So that's why I put them neutral now rather than pro-Israeli, because at one point they were. Currently, they're kind of cool on that relationship. The relationship between Turkey and this Assad regime today is horrible. Turkey is actively backing the separatists, but we'll go there next week.
So,
Next week
Or the following week, rather. We'll save that for another time.
going back to the heavy young men, especially in Yemen,
Yeah.
that's the same type of thing goes on in Egypt, and that's what caused those rallies back in, 2011, right?
And today.
And to today.
As
So
much-
it's
yeah.
like 54% unemployment
Sure.
amongst young
Yeah.
people, yeah.
70% in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, yeah.
Think about that. Yes.
In my courses, we do a section on information analysis. And we went through all this demographics about population under 30, unemployment, not going to school, and cost of food. And we tracked them all for like 20 different countries, but most, about 15 of them were Arab countries. And it turned, so I said, okay, let's put this in practical terms. It means that out of 10 people in this room, 4 of you will not have a job before you're 35 years old.
That's right.
And you will spend, for a Big Mac, you would spend $49.
That's right.
Because that, works out, if they're spending so much, it's like 7 times or whatever for cost of living.
Exactly. But you can, if we were to do a mini course on terrorism, you can see it over and over and over. Terrorist movements thrive when people feel they have nothing to lose. When they have something, terrorist movements tend to fizzle out. You'd think we'd learn our lesson.
So how do we solve it?
You've got 4.5 minutes.
Yeah.
This is kind of on a different tack, but I'm going back to things like Bedroom and Rope, for instance. The Jews have been discriminated against for many, many years.
Yes,
Has
they have
Arabs been
And that's part of why you have that anything goes attitude.
Yeah.
No way are we going back to that.
That's right. I guess twofold. First of all, have we discriminated against Arabs like we have against the Jews?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I mean, because I know...
Arab Americans would say yes. I went to a synagogue once and I asked the imam, how many Muslims are in the United States?
Not a synagogue.
Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm tired. I went to a mosque once, and I asked the imam, the teacher, like rabbi, it's a similar idea, the teacher of the mosque, how many Muslims are there in the United States? And he said, don't ask me, ask the CIA.
Oh my.
That's the CIA.
Okay.
Go through any airport.
When I was in France, living in France in '66, there were a lot of what they called Arabs from Algeria in Lyon, where I lived, and the attitude towards them was very bad. They did not like them at all.
Well,
Yeah.
to a greater or lesser extent.
There was a minority of Jews that lived throughout the Arab lands. They're largely gone. There was a substantial Christian minority at one time. 10% of Iraq was once Christian. Way down, emigration, getting out of Dodge.
Right, they have just been.
There's sort of it's not ethnic cleansing, it's ethnic cleansing by default because the minorities are choosing to leave. Because it's not safe to live there
And
anymore.
that's what's happened to the Christians within that whole region.
Yeah.
Especially in Egypt, just this year with the Coptics,
Oh yeah, the Coptics are regularly discriminated against, beaten
Yeah.
up, brutalized.
killed.
Yeah,
Killed.
Yeah.
So, solutions. First of all, anybody who thinks they're going to solve this in a year or two, I want to know what they're smoking. It's good stuff.
It's got to be 3 generations, right?
Yeah. However, there is a moderate Islamic position that I think holds promise in the long run. And that is bowing back to Abraham, where both Ishmael and Isaac, since they are both sons of Abraham, have equal right to the land.
And they're brothers.
They are brothers. Share. Take a long time to get there. It's going to have to be at least generational to get past the oversupply of unemployed young men, an economic stimulus package to cut down the unemployment so that people have something so they're less likely to engage in terrorist positions would also be helpful. You're talking a couple of decades at least to get to that point. You may have to put up a big fence and physically separate them in the meantime. No, I don't have the magic solution, but if I were in the halls of power, that's where I'd want, the direction I would want to go. Yes?
And I would add to that, as a casual reader of history, this may go away. Terrorism never will.
No, it is a
It
technique.
will pop up somewhere else in the
Yeah.
world.
Wherever there are.
Terrorism is a technique that is used by a weaker military force against a stronger military force. It is as old as time. Whenever you have a situation where you've got a very strong military against a weak force, you will see guerrilla warfare, you will see civil disobedience, you will see what we currently call terrorism. It is a technique, it is a tactic.
How
Properly-
did Israel come into existence? through terrorism.
In part through terrorism, yes.
The
There were
United
2 large
States.
terrorist organizations,
There are those
according to the
that-
Brits.
There are those that say the United States,
No,
that we did
I
that
mean
with.
historically.
Oh, that was invasion, flat out invasion.
Yeah, 1000, 1500 BC.
Oh, yeah, that was flat out invasion with Joshua.
Yeah.
It was by conquest, so shouldn't we give it all to Canaanites? They were there first. Except we don't know who they are. We don't know who they are. But terrorism is a subject in itself. With the terrorism, what you have to keep in mind is it is a tactic, it is a technique. You really cannot be a terrorist. It's actually a misnomer, technically speaking. You could be an extremist, you could be a radical, but a terrorist is like saying, well, I'm a frontal assaultist. I'm in favor of frontal assault with infantry. Or I'm an encirclist. I'm in favoring of circling, coming in around the back. Or I'm a retrogradist, which means I'm getting out of here. I'm sorry, I'm wrong.
But there are those that say the United States, we used terror tactics against the Brits, way back in the Revolutionary War.
And the British used terror tactics against us.
Yep.
Both sides use terror as a tactic. That's why I'm uncomfortable with calling the Arab extremists terrorists. Personally, I would call them shirk. Now, what is shirk? Shirk is Arabic, roughly translated as heretic. I would call them a heretic because they they glorify suicide when the Quran forbids it. I would call them shirk because they kill women and children when the Quran forbids it. And I would try to use the Islamic religion against the extremists. Rather than calling them Islamic terrorists, just builds them up in that community. It has the opposite effect of what we're trying to do.
So why hasn't, like the State Department or
Because
Pentagon
they're arresting.
Our civilian... Hey, I'm not the only one.
But I'm just saying,
I'm not the only one.
Why
There
hasn't
are-
somebody thought about that tactic?
Well, there are. If you talk to military civil affairs folks, they'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other folks saying the same thing, but our civilian masters, and when you're in the military, that's what you refer to as Congress, the President, our civilian masters, and that's the way you want it. You do not want the military in charge, believe me.
Yeah.
One of the worst run governments in the world is a military-run government. Our civilian masters have said, no, we're going to call them terrorists. The media's picked up on it, and that's what they are now.
It's because it plays better with voters, I think.
So now we have everybody in the world saying their opponents are terrorists. In Iraq, we have each side saying the other is terrorists. Both sides are using terror tactics.
So when we say it's a war on terror, we're just saying it's a war and a tactic.
Yeah, we are.
It's like
It's a war on frontal assaults.
Yeah.
Well, is there any hope or possibility that liberal Islam, the imams will,
In 20 years.
okay, another generation?
When the young men get old enough that they either have that job, have something, have no longer desire to engage in violent conflict,
Or dead.
and now the terror groups have no soldiers. They have no recruits because the demographics are going to work against them. In the meantime, I think we're going to see more of the same, unless the economies improve enough that people can start having lives.
Yeah.
That would be my read. Well, I have extended, I've gone past our allotted time. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.